Look, in my humble but objectively correct opinion, the 90-90 switch is probably the best hip mobility exercise out there. And you can ask anyone who agrees with me, because it's not just a simple exercise. The 90-90 switch is an avenue to far more advanced exercises, and if used as a foundation, is practically enough to take care of your entire hip mobility needs and then some. But today, I'm not just going to show you how to do the 90-90 switch, irrespective of your current fitness or mobility level, but I'm also going to show you how you can use this single exercise as a foundation for a myriad of different mobility drills that are going to take your hip mobility to the highest level. So if you're ready, let's go and have some fun. Level number 1, you've got zero hip mobility for whatever reason. Your starting position will be flat with your back and your feet as well, in a very relaxed manner. Let your legs fall to the left side. Do not actively push down yet. Hold for a second and then simply let them fall to the right side. Stay very relaxed. We have internal and external rotation in our hip joints. Combined, we have a little bit of lumbar rotation, and this exercise as a passive mobility move already feels absolutely amazing and can help us open up our hips and our lower back a little bit, especially if you're really tight in those areas. And as this becomes more comfortable, now you can actively start pushing your knees down towards the floor. Be mindful of your shoulders, always staying in full contact with the floor as well. And then switch. Actively push your knees down. Try and hold for a second or two and reverse. And repeat a handful of times until you feel loosened up. Or if this is the end of your capabilities, use this as your first level until you can progress. Once your mobility has progressed a little bit, we will sit up, placing our hands behind our back, and now we will do the same thing by simply moving to the left, combining internal and external hip rotation, and to the right, requiring a little bit more strength, a little bit more mobility, and also adding a lot more spinal rotation, which is very important when it comes to hip mobility. The tighter you are in your spinal musculature, especially your spinal erectors, the less mobility you will have for your hips. So always be mindful of combining spinal mobility with hip mobility, which the 90-90 switch does absolutely perfectly. And this position actually gives us an amazing bonus we can use in this exercise, because once we are at the end of our range of motion here, we can start extending our hips, flexing our glutes and raising, so you can add a little bit more quad and hip flexor flexibility, which you will feel a lot if you are super tight in your hip flexors and your quads, like so. Raise, and we're adding a lot of posterior chain strength, especially for our glutes and our biceps, because this exercise will combine posterior chain strength with anterior chain flexibility, and now also internal and external hip rotation. And now, before we can do a full 90-90 switch from a deep squat starting position, we will use basically a wall-assisted deep squat starting position. We are actively pushing backwards, and now from here, very carefully, we will combine once again internal with external rotation, like so, rolling over our toes, lengthening into dorsiflexion in our ankle, holding for a second or two, and then while actively pushing our back against the wall behind us to help us reverse this movement before we repeat into the other direction. Very carefully, take your time, lengthen your ankles, hold for a second or two before you push back actively and reverse into the other direction. This is gonna help you out a lot until you have the necessary hip flexor and core strength, as well as mobility in all of those joints to go through this movement all by yourself. If you're still lacking a little bit of, for instance, ankle mobility, your heels start raising, or you don't have the necessary strength fully yet, you can work with your hands on the floor. Now we're going to combine internal rotation by bringing our knee right in front of our foot, like so, rolling over our toes, pushing our hip down to the floor, and then moving into external rotation in the other leg. And with as much assistance as you need, you can move forward like so. First, always the externally rotated leg up, and then push forward, roll over your toes, the internally rotated leg back into our starting position. And then once again, with as much assistance as you require, internally rotate first, push your hips down, and then externally rotate on the other side. Or if you're already strong and mobile enough, we're going to use our core, our hip flexors, our glutes, and our leg musculature to first externally rotated leg. And now we actively flex to pull forward, and we're always rolling over our toes back into our starting position. And then we repeat internal rotation on one side, rolling over our toes, external rotation on the other side, upper body fully upright. This exercise is absolutely amazing at combining hip strength with hip flexibility. And as we progress through the upcoming variations, you will be amazed at how much you can do with this basic movement pattern as a foundation. Now, if I asked you, what is this movement pattern missing when it comes to flexibility, you will of course say hip flexors and quads, and you're absolutely right. And this is why, when we have mastered this basic movement, switching from one side to the other, now we will add a hip flexor and quad stretch by elevating our hip, flexing our posterior chain, and now pushing forward, lengthening all the way, starting in our anterior chain, our tibialis, our quads, our hip flexors, our abdominals. We can even open up our chest and shoulders, now having a complete anterior chain stretch. And then we're always gonna sit down all the way, reverse this movement, and repeat into the other direction, where we raise our hips, flex our posterior, and lengthen our anterior chain, holding for a second or two. Enjoy the stretch before you sit down. Now basically combining everything our hips do, internal and external rotation, as well as flexion and extension, strengthening and stretching every single muscle that is even remotely connected to your hip movements. This video is sponsored by you. Liking this video, subscribing to this channel, watching the whole thing, hell, maybe you will even leave a comment below, is all the sponsorship I need. You are the only reason I make those videos. And I know what you're thinking. Now we have a lot of anterior chain flexibility, but we have not yet maximized glute flexibility. To that I say, you're way too smart. You know way too much about anatomy. But that is an easy remedy, because once again, same starting position. And now from here, as we fold forward towards the externally rotated leg, like so, we have more and more glute flexibility added to this movement before we reverse. And now once again, full strength pattern, complete rotations, and folding forward once more. The more we keep our back straight or extended, the more glute flexibility we can add, which also means the more you round your back, the less stretch you will have surrounding your glutes. So if you are very mobile, you can flex your spinal erectors and push down towards your leg. If you lack the necessary flexibility but want to maximize the stretch the tiniest bit, you can carefully round your back and pull down slowly. Hold for a second before you reverse and repeat into the other direction with whatever capability you have. And you would say something like, I know hip flexor flexibility is very important, but what most people lack even more than hip flexor flexibility is hip flexor strength. And to that I say, you're absolutely right, which is why once we have started with our base movement pattern, we're massively gonna maximize hip flexor strength by taking the outside leg, raising it like so, going through a complete rotation, crossing over the other leg, and then reversing into our starting position like so. And now we're gonna reverse all the way up, all the way down to the other side, raising the outside leg, staying upright in our upper body. A lot of strength in our hip flexors and our adductors as well, and our glutes as well. Crossing over, touch down a little bit. A lot of core engagement also. You're absolutely welcome. And as we said, glute strength by reversing and putting our leg down before we repeat into the other direction. Roll over, rotate, raise the external leg, touch down, and reverse. And you're like, dude, this is child's play, because everyone knows that the more complex a movement pattern, the more benefits we can reap from it. And at this point, you just know way too much. So let us put some things together before we move on to the next variation. We have our internal and external rotation. We have our forward fold, up again, and now we combine. Rotate inward, rotate outward, place down, reverse into our starting position, and into the other direction. Fold forward, up, raise, touch down, across your knee, reverse, and back into our starting position. And now we have a somewhat complex movement pattern. We have complete glute stretch, we reverse, we have all the strength required for all of those muscles surrounding our hip joint. And if you want to make this even more complex, even more beneficial, once we are seated here, folding forward, lengthening our glutes, and then pushing forward, strengthening our glutes before we sit down, cross over like so, reverse, and of course into the other direction. First, we stretch our posterior chain, we strengthen our posterior chain, we sit down, we strengthen all the muscles surrounding our hip joint once more, and so on and so forth. And you would say something like, yeah, spinal mobility is so important, then why didn't we touch more on that? At this point, I'm wondering, why are you even here if you know all of this stuff? Check it out. Once we have our internal and external rotation, now we can add an insane amount of spinal mobility by turning our upper body as far to the left as we can, and then we will simply fold towards the floor with our upper body, adding complete spinal rotation. And an even better bonus, we also have massive amounts of quad flexibility and hip flexor flexibility, as well as lengthening our transverse abdominis through this insane rotation. Also lengthening our spinal erectors and opening up our chest and shoulders the more we can move down towards the floor. And from here, we're going to require a lot of strength to sit back up, reverse, repeat into the other direction, go into a complete rotation like so, and then fold downwards as much as we can, rotating our entire spine from our butt all the way towards our head. And this position is actually very comfortable to hold for even 20 to 30 seconds because it releases an insane amount of tension, especially in our lumbar spine, which, if you are seated all day long, can get very tight and very uncomfortable. All the way up, reverse, rotate, and so on and so forth. And now you're like, so what about our hamstrings? And I'm like, what about our hamstrings? Don't worry, have I ever let you down? Actually, don't answer that. There is actually a very easy remedy for that, because we can simply combine our 90-90 switch like so. While folding forward, we already have a little bit of hamstring flexibility, and then once we stand back up, we will fold forward like so, lengthen our posterior chain, and now actively flex your anterior chain, pull your upper body down, hold for a second or two before you sit back down again. Internal rotation, external rotation if you want. Add this glute stretch, reverse, fold forward, hold for a second or two, and combine once again as many movements as you want. Fold forward, sit up, reverse, cross over, reverse, back into our starting position, fold forward, and repeat as many exercises in one single pattern as you feel like. Of course, while you can practice all of those separately, let me show you how you can put it together into a routine, because that is going to make this so much more effective. We're going to start with our base movement, do it for a handful of times. 3 to 4 repetitions for each side would be enough if you are doing this every single day. Then you will move on to the next exercise within the same routine. Reverse, 3 or 4 repetitions into each direction before you move on to the next exercise, like so. Folding forward, reversing, move in and out, repeat into the other direction, folding forward, up, in and out. And once again, we can start adding the hip strength as well as the glute strength. Down and up, elevate, reverse, cross over, reverse. Repeat the whole damn thing into the other direction, like so. Fold forward and up, extend, reverse, cross over, reverse. Add your forward folds, hold for a second or two, and so on and so forth. Now, I know I do a lot of hee-hees and ha-has, but I'm not exaggerating when I tell you this exercise is absolutely amazing, unparalleled when it comes to opening up your hips, opening up avenues to even more hip mobility and more advanced exercises. And if you can do it regularly for a handful of weeks, you will be amazed at how far you can get by using such a simple foundational exercise and branching out into different variations. Sadly, that's all the time I've left you today, but we do stuff like that very regularly, which means that I'll very likely see you soon. So until then, have a good one. Captain Cairo. Peace out.